Hello guys, and welcome to Build the Basics. In this video we'll be going through some sawing basics. So to cut up stuff, you've got many types of tools you can use. Some are manual, some are corded. Let's start with the manual ones. Over here we've got a few types of saws. As you can see, this is a timber saw. How you differentiate a timber saw from the others is that timber saws have large teeth. Whereas the other saw, this one's called a hacksaw, it's got tiny little teeth. So if you're using a timber saw, just make sure that you identify that it's got large teeth. The reason is you want to cut up timber fast. If you're cutting up, say, pieces of metal or pipes, you want to use a hacksaw, or some people call it a pipe saw, because the blade has much finer teeth, and that allows you to cut away the shards of plastic or perspex or metal. Okay, you don't want to use this because it won't work. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to teach you how to cut a little thin sheet of plywood using a manual handsaw. So first thing you want to do is draw your line. So I'm using an old pencil and a set square. This allows your line to be perpendicular. You want to make sure it's straight. Okay, there you go. Okay, so now using a handsaw, first of all you want to make sure that there are no obstructions around, no hands around. You know, if you got your friend telling you, hey, do this, do that, you know, just make sure that he's standing away from you. Okay, next, you just want to make sure that you're cutting from the far side. You don't want to be cutting here because your natural position is on top of the wood, so you want to be cutting here. Also, you want to aim your saw in a 45-degree downward angle rather than this way, because this helps you guide your saw along the track, rather than if you're cutting here, you've got a tendency to slip around. Okay, so try to do a 30-degree, 45-degree angle. And then next, you want to start with a pilot hole, a pilot line. What that is a little light line which allows you to go faster later. Okay, so firstly, you want to do some light cutting. So you want to pull first rather than push, okay, because it's easier to pull. So I'm using my little thumb to guide the blade, not at the teeth, but you want to put it a little higher up. So I'm just going to pull lightly. Just a few times, and once you're confident, you move your hand away and full speed ahead. Okay, some useful tips. If your saw gets stuck right in the middle, you know, take your saw out, try to wiggle it out, and then start again from the beginning. Okay, if it gets stuck again, I don't know, maybe your teeth are blunt, maybe you want to buy a new saw, or maybe you want to put some WD-40 on the blade. Okay. Also, one last thing, as you're cutting, you don't want to firm up your hand and move your body. You want your hand to be relaxed. Okay, so what you're doing is you're cutting and you're using your elbow to push forward and backward. Okay, that's about it for manual hand tools. Okay, now the next thing I'll be going through are some basic power tools. So the next simplest one is the jigsaw. Now the jigsaw, it's got this little detachable blade that goes back and forth. It's pretty good for cutting thin sheets like your plywood, maybe a thin tabletop. But basically, this is very good for cutting, curved lines. Let's say I want to cut a, I want to smoothen the edge here. Let's say I'm going to cut this off. Okay, so the jigsaw has a few basic parts. You've got your trigger, you've got your blade, and you've got a little hole here to replace your blade, and there's a little screwdriver that comes where you can loosen the screw and take the blade out. Okay, so first up, always know that the blade must face front because it's easier to push rather than pull. So when you install your blade, always make sure that the teeth are facing out from you. Next, when you're sawing, always make sure you're pushing away from you rather than like this way or sideways. So if you're doing a curved cut, you want to try and move your body around the cut. If you can't, then yeah, you can just stay around there but if you're coming back towards you, you want to move the other way. Okay, this is just for safety, it's really important, okay guys? Okay, now I'm going to start cutting, and because it's a curved line, as I'm going, I'm going to follow the line, and I'm going to steer the jigsaw from the back. I'm not going to steer the front and turn it, but I'm going to steer the back. It's just like driving a car. Alright, bombs away! Alright, so that's the jigsaw. It's really fun. I recommend that you guys get one if you're doing a lot of little handiwork at home. Okay, next we're going to go to the circular saw. Now the circular saw is a little bit more advanced than the jigsaw. Reason being is because it's got a larger blade and it's circular. So the benefits of a circular saw is that it's good for cutting long lengths. So let's say if you have, if you're building a table at home and the tabletop is too wide and you want to narrow it, this is very good for cutting along the long lengths of your table. Rather than using a jigsaw where it's very difficult to control the straightness of your line. The large blade, the big blade, it helps you run along the lines much straighter. Also, a circular saw allows you to cut angle cuts, and also you can play with the depth of your cut. Okay? So now, let's get into it. I'm going to wear my safety glasses. Then I'm going to start measuring. Using my set square, get my line perpendicular. Okay, so first thing you want to know is that there is a blade guard here. This protects your blade while it's running. So this automatically opens as you're pushing through your wood, and after you're done, it springs back. Now the reason the blade guard is there is because even though it's switched off, the blade may still be running. So if you want to put it down or if you want to pass it to someone, this is really important. So make sure if the blade guard has any issues with it, if the spring is missing, if it's left open, just make sure you're aware of that and you go and fix it real soon. Okay? So firstly, I recommend that you use 2 hands for the circular saw because it's pretty heavy. You want to make sure that your circular saw is flat against your workpiece. Try not to cut your piece like that, because then you can't control the direction you're going. You want to make sure that the base plate here is flat on your piece. Next, you want to know that your blade is on your line. So how that is that there's a 0 marker here. You want the 0 marker to be on the inside of your workpiece, because the blade will cut on the left side of that 0 marker. Okay, so I'm just going to align it, and then you want to start the saw before you touch your workpiece. That allows the blade to run at its full capacity, and then you start sawing through. Okay, you guys ready? Make sure you've got your glasses, and oh, one last thing. My face mask. This is really important, guys. Okay, make sure you got your face mask on. I mean, simple reason, the circular saw is the blade runs at much higher speeds, so there's a lot of dust created around, so make sure you've got your face mask. You could use some earplugs, but I'm not really comfortable with that. Okay, so remember, always start the saw before you touch your workpiece. Okay, that's about it for the circular saw. Okay, and lastly, we've got the next basic tool called the chop saw. Now, the chop saw is really big. It may be scary, but if you follow the correct safety procedures, you'll find it very useful. Okay, let me just explain the basic parts of the chop saw. You have the safety lock. So if you press the saw down, open the safety lock, and you can open it. The next is you have your blade. The blade is running here. You have your blade guard. This protects the blade throughout your cut. Next you have your handle and your trigger. Okay. Also you have your fence here, and you have a little handy clamp here. So let's say you want to put a piece of wood. You don't have to hold the clamp because the blade is really scary. You can just use this clamp and tighten it and move your hand away. Okay. Now, so I'm going to demo how to cut this 2x4, this piece of timber. Okay, so let's say I want to cut somewhere around here. I'm going to mark a piece of wood using my set square again. Okay, the next thing you want to do is make sure you know which side you're going to use. So let's say I want this side and I want to throw this away. I'm just going to mark X here. Okay. Next, as I move to the saw, I'm going to open the clamp. So when I'm aligning my piece of wood, I want to consider that the blade is the blade cuts away some of the timber, so you want to make sure that the blade aligns to the other side of your line. You don't want to cut into your piece, so if you're working with high accuracy, you want to make sure that the left side of this blade is touching the line, rather than cutting right on the line. Okay? So what you can do is, without pressing the trigger, you're just going to lower the saw head, and you're just going to move your piece of wood until the saw touches the line. And you don't want to move too much into the piece that you want. Okay, you can cut just a little bit outside, and later, you can shave it off, you can sand it. Okay, so now once you're done, close the tag. Okay, and you're almost ready to go. Last thing is wear your face mask. Okay, you ready? Alright, there we go. So just a few reminders. When you're lowering the saw, you want to make sure that you go all the way down. Don't cut halfway and then let go of the trigger, because that might make the blade get stuck in between. So you make sure that you hold the trigger all the way, cut all the way down, let go of the trigger, and then put on your safety lock. Okay? So that's about it for the chop saw and for the whole basics of sawing. So I hope you guys join us for assessment part 2 at the facility.